What is up, fellas? TheGOOB here with a new episode of Rewriting History with TheGOOB. Just setting up my screens here. We're talking OOPARTs finally. I've been talking about OOPARTs. Let me go ahead and pause this video before it actually... I guess I have to wait for it to start playing before I can pause it. I'll hear myself in the background in a moment here. But yeah, we're talking about some OOPARTs today. Now I'm starting to worry that I'm not actually broadcasting because it's could just be the delay. There's been a long delay. Starting to think I'm not actually broadcasting though. So, son of a bitch. What's going on here? Am I live? I really can't tell if I'm live. I'm live. Yeah. Sorry, fellas. Sorry about that. All right. So I am live. I'm talking about OOPARTs finally. It's just part one. There are a lot of OOPARTs I want to talk about. I'm not sure if I'll get to all of them. Yeah. Sorry, fellas. I was just, hey, it's a low value show. It's a low value show. Hopefully someone appreciated the thumbnail. I don't know if anyone got it, but shout out to you if you did. It can be our little secret. So yeah, I've got a lot more OOPARTs to talk about than just this episode. I'm gonna have to turn off my notifications because that's loud and annoying. Okay. So, let's jump in here with, yeah, the London Hammer is a decent OOPART to start with. So the London Hammer is great because it's from Texas, London, Texas. They called it the London Hammer for this hammer that was found in Texas. There's multiple pictures of it. This is a pretty good representation of it. It's still got a wooden handle. It's relatively modern looking hammer. I mean, not modern to our standards, but like early 1900s, this would appear to be, contemporary, quite possibly. This is an interesting artifact for several reasons. One is because, unlike, spoiler alert, some of the artifacts that we're going to be talking about, this is real. Some of the OOPARTs seem to just be made up fantasy, unfortunately. But the London Hammer is a real hammer. There's debate about what it actually means, but this is a real artifact. You can go visit it in a museum. It is real metal. It is real wood. And interestingly, this wood is partially petrified, right? And that's supposed to take a long period of time to petrify wood. The stone, so there's a little bit of argument about the origins of this, right? It was found by, this family. They found a stone with a piece of wood sticking out of it, so they took it home. They held on to it for 10 years, and then one of the kids in the family broke the stone open, and inside this stone was the hammer that you now see. So the exact location of where this hammer was found is not determinable because it sat with a family for 10 years before they realized what it even was. Memory of where you found a rock 10 years ago isn't perfect. So they know the general area, but they don't know exactly where. And they dated some of the stones in that area to be 300 million years old. You know how I feel about dating. Who's to say those stones are 300 million years old? I don't know. They probably don't really know. Either way, it's clearly conflicting with what we think we know about how things work. Either that hammer is far, far, far older than we think hammers should be, which is somewhat suggested by the partially petrified wood, but it's probably not 300 million years old, because I would imagine the wood would be fully petrified or just gone at that point. Um, so is this an example of an artifact that rewrites history, that there was, an advanced human civilization 300 million years ago? I don't necessarily think so, but I do think it does force us to take another look at these natural processes that we've supposedly got so well figured out. Because the London hammer is not the guy who found it and the guy who owns it won't allow carbon dating on the handle. So we could probably learn a lot more about it, but won't allow carbon dating on the handle, which kind of sucks. But there are several artifacts that have been found encased in stone, like several modern artifacts that have been found fully encased in stones, which are supposedly these really old stones, but I think clearly they're not. When you're finding a spark plug, that's one of the examples. If you want to look that up on your own time, there's a spark plug, there's the London hammer, there's screws that have been found, there's all kinds of things that have been found encased in stone. And my conclusion to this is not that this civilization was 300 million years old and we're finding remnants wrapped up in stone. It's that we don't actually understand how stones are formed very well. A lot of the processes that we assume we understand in depth, we probably just have a surface level understanding of. There's probably certain situations and scenarios that cause rapid forming of stones rather than, over hundreds of millions of years like we've been told. And so is this hammer 300 million years old? Severely doubt it. It's a very interesting artifact, though. I mean, partially petrified wood, a legitimate metal hammer in stone. Very, very curious, and it is 100% real. No one is debating whether or not this thing exists, or even really whether it was found where it was, or whether it's real. People pretty well accept that this is a real artifact. It's just, how did it get there? I do need a Jamie, but also I just have limited, time as far as how many objects I can present. So I'm presenting the hammer as, one object from a category of OOPARTs. And I mentioned some other objects in that category, like the spark plug. There's also a computer chip, and a few different screws, a lot of different screws, actually, many different screws found in stones, which is what I'll be discussing next. Also, I wanted to bring up real quick on the London hammer. If you Google the London hammer, this is the number one result. You're going to get very few results, number one after Wikipedia at least. And I'm just going to read the last line here. While an extremely cool find, the rock formation is not as ancient as it appeared. Likely a miner dropped the hammer a century ago, or perhaps a touch earlier, after which the rock formed around it. It was not, repeat, not proof of the Flintstones. So Google is promoting the results that really make it clear that don't question your history, guys. Nothing to see here. You're not allowed to see, like, I just closed it, but that other article that I had up really basically came to a similar conclusion, but it had a lot more information in it, and it did question things a little bit more. And I tried searching for that article with the name of the publication, the name of the article, several keywords from the article. It would not pop up on Google. It was completely unsearchable on Google, and it was really, really, like, just barely outside of what's acceptable. So just emphasizing the censorship that's going on, emphasizing how much and this is Google, but all of them, all of the search engines are compromised, even Yandex, which is what I use to ultimately find this. Let me read this chat a little bit. Show the Russian stuff. Yeah, I wanted to talk about a few different Russian things. The most interesting one being the Ural Mountain wall, which if I have time to, I'll get to, but there's a few Russian items in this. Mine dolphins and submarines. We trained some dolphins to mess with submarines, if that's what you mean. Let me find this screw here real quick amongst all of my tabs. Some of the cool things I want to talk about. Okay. So, yeah, we'll start with this one. This is the Lanzhou stone found in Lanzhou, China. And it's this black stone that supposedly people have tested, but were unable to determine exactly what type of stone it was. And this threaded screw piece of metal that is threaded, the threads were measured and consistently spaced. The thing with this one is that it doesn't seem to be real. You really only get that one picture of it. You can't go visit this in a museum. There was one person that, no, sorry, that was mixing that up with a different story. Anyways, yeah, it appeared in some articles way back. Initially, I think the very first article, if I read this whole thing, it was like it was a vegetarian journal. It was a vegetarian magazine, and then after that, it was published in a UFO magazine, and then basically the exact same wording from those original articles has just been copy and pasted and shared in some other, various forums across the internet since then. So trying to dig up more information about this, there are some real people associated with it. Like there's the name Zilin Wang, Mr. Zilin Wang. You could potentially try and look him up, but it doesn't seem to be real. There doesn't seem to be, either it was covered up very, very effectively, or it's just a story that someone made up. And something that I found very interesting is, while I was looking into this, I found these. This is for sale. Shiva, Shalagrim, Shivling, Shalagrim, religious gifts, Shalagrim stone. I don't know exactly what this is, but clearly a recreation of this. If you look closely, you will see that they are two different stones, two different objects. Here's a third one. This is, again, a stone that is being sold for religious purposes. So I didn't fully look into this. I don't actually know what's going on here, but I would say it's clearly a recreation of this, and it seems to be being sold, copies of this thing, impersonations of this thing, sold as some type of Hindu religious artifact. So don't know what's going on there, but thought I'd share it. So yeah, Lanzhou stone doesn't seem to exist. Moving on to another screw. This is in the outskirts of Moscow. This is another Moscow one. Oops. My brain's kind of blanking on the details of this story. I just looked it up. I just looked up a whole bunch of different stories, and I'm trying to keep them straight in my head, and right now I'm failing a little bit. But this is another screw. It's clearly a threaded screw. The threads are evenly spaced. You can see this. It looks, very unnatural. There's multiple pictures down here you can see how big it is, in reference to a hand. They x-rayed this thing. And down here are some examples of the fossils that the animals that they're suggesting this is a fossil of. These are pretty small pictures, but and a pretty limited sample size. You know, you have one picture here to compare it to. But this does look very, very straight. The spacing looks very, very consistent, and it also looks threaded. You know, it's not just rings going around, but it does look like they progress downwards in a spiral. So along in Russia, you'll find a lot more screw-like objects. There's these spherules. I don't know how to say spherules. Spirule, I think, is what they call them. But all throughout the snow in Siberia, yeah, the Kaluga screw. Thank you. My brain wouldn't pull that up, but all throughout the snow in Siberia, there's these metal fragments that don't seem to be natural, or at least we don't have a natural explanation for yet, and they're all over. They're all over. They seem to be, you know, microscopic mechanical pieces, including threaded screws and various other different metallic shapes. So some interesting stuff there. And again, these all suggest, you know, that they could suggest alien life forms. This could be evidence of, you know, alien tech coming down to Earth. This could be evidence of extremely old advanced civilizations, whether lizard people, right? You got the reptilians, which there is a bit of compelling evidence for lizard people in our very ancient past. I don't know if I buy into it personally, but there's some decent arguments to be made, at least. You know, or where I lean towards the most is these do seem to be man-made objects, and they are in rocks. So how did they get there? Maybe there's more to rock formation than, you know, we actually understand. Maybe there's something that allows it to happen much, much quicker. There's these stones called, I think they're called the growing stones or the moving stones. They might be called the moving stones. I'm just going off the top of the dome here. I wasn't planning on including this in the episode, but it's somewhat related. So I don't remember the details. I don't remember where. There's a few different locations where this happens, actually, but they're mostly these round stones that will move on their own. They will roll around, and people have also measured them and found that not only are they rolling around on their own, but they're growing. They're getting larger in size, and, you know, like a few inches a year, sometimes even faster than that. So way different from what we supposedly believe about stones. There ain't enough gold. Mineralization. Kaluga surfs up. That's it. Yeah, the fairy rings are interesting. I never mentioned the cabbage patches that were brought up last week. There's been a lot of serendipity with this show. Like, multiple times, many times, I've released a short, you know, declaring what I'm going to talk about as far as a topic for the next week. And then within like a few hours of that being released, one of the channels that I follow, like, uploads a video specifically about that topic. It's happened a whole bunch. There's just been a whole bunch of serendipity. And Mind Unveiled talks about Cabbage Patch Kids. I don't know if any of you have had the balls to check out Mind Unveiled. It's a pure schizo channel. I absolutely love it. I'm not really recommending it for historical value. I don't really know why I'm recommending it. I just think it's funny. But he's been deep into Cabbage Patch Kids lately, and yeah, I don't really believe that 200 years ago we were farming babies from cabbage patches in a literal sense, but the amount of evidence he's found, an amount of weird things, like I don't know. I guess it just goes to show that like you can really build a story, a pretty convincing and solid and like proof-filled story around something that is completely ridiculous. Because if the Cabbage Patch, no matter how you look at it, if the Cabbage Patch story that Mine Unveiled is trying to tell is true, then the mainstream history is absolutely ridiculous. And if mainstream history is true, then the Cabbage Patch history is absolutely ridiculous. And there's honestly like a shitload of evidence to enough to convince people. Like if you didn't know any better, if you had no knowledge of history and you were just presented one side or the other, it would be enough to convince you very easily. So it's just kind of enforcing this idea of flimsy history. We've built up this narrative. We've built up this story. We've accepted all of these facts. We've, upon flimsy narrative, we've built more flimsy narrative, and this is the whole process of history. So it's just emphasizing how flimsy history is. Rolling Stones in the desert. Yeah, and there's also the salt flats that have the moving stones, which were explained finally after, hundreds of years of mystery of how these lines are forming on these salt flats and these deserts and these stones are moving. They go, oh, well, what's happening is they're freezing, and this thin layer of ice is reducing the friction to almost zero, and then just a light breeze is pushing these very heavy stones across the salt flats. Well, I'm sorry, that's complete and total bullshit, because if the friction was zero, you wouldn't have all of the earth turned up and the trail left by the stone. The stone is digging into the earth and leaving a distinct trail as it's being moved. This is not happening because of a light wind. We still have no idea how these stones are moving or why they're moving. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of examples like that. There's a whole bunch of different examples. Yeah, because of the freezing drizzle. I don't know if you actually believe it, but I think that's utter nonsense. I think that's utter nonsense. Were the Nazis the bad guy or Hitler? That's a good question. The Lore Lodge fellows. I'm not familiar with them, but I generally do enjoy watching people who debunk, it really depends on their attitude. When they're just a, cunty little shit, it makes it hard to enjoy it, even if what they're saying is right. But I might check those guys out, the Lore Lodge fellows. Yeah, the salt flats is what I was. Yeah, same thing. Yeah, so Luca agrees. Eric maybe agrees. Here's one of the more interesting objects I wanted to talk about. Getting back to the OOPARTs here, I had to find this Russian website using a Russian search index to find some decent information and pictures from this. And as far as I can tell, this is absolutely legitimate. There is absolutely zero question of its validity. There's multiple pictures taken from multiple angles. The reports are consistent. There's the initial reports and then someone reaching out to the guy who initially reported it and confirming his story, and it stayed consistent. So like this is a coal mine. I think 900 meters down. So 900 meters down into this coal mine, this guy found this wheel sandwiched in between. So there were layers of coal and layers of sandstone, and they were digging out the coal, and this is the bottom of a layer of sandstone that they found this in, right? This mine is a real mine. You can go to this mine today. Unfortunately, you can't access the mine because the mine has been flooded. So you can't go down there to verify any of this. And according to the reports, there's no pictures of the second wheel, but according to the reports, there was a second wheel that had been pretty heavily damaged by blasting when they were digging, but they could see this second wheel. There were two different wheels found in this same coal mine, and this one gets a lot harder to explain because with the hammer, with the spark plug, with the screws, they do go against our understanding of stone formation, but they're a lot easier to brush off. You find a spark plug that's been calcified and mineralized in a stream bed, and you go, okay, well we misunderstand how quickly some of these mineralization processes can happen under certain circumstances. Maybe this happened. Maybe it's a really old spark plug from like a Model T car or something like that, and it's been sitting there a long time and it happened really quick. Same thing with the hammer, same thing with the screws. This is 900 meters down into a coal mine, extremely deep in the earth. There's, again, multiple pictures from multiple angles. The pictures do not appear to be faked or altered in any way. There's no easy explanation for this. How did it get that deep? How did it get, become a part of a sandstone layer sandwiched in between a sandstone and a coal layer? I don't know, man. This one is a genuine OOPART. This one is one that really can't be brushed aside, in my opinion. I don't have an explanation for this one other than, yeah, maybe there was some other type of civilization here, like hundreds of millions of years ago. This website had a decent amount of cool stuff on it as well. And just even just the research on this object alone was pretty impressive. They did some really solid research here. So, if you feel like checking it, I haven't looked through the rest of this website. I just looked at, the titles of some of the other articles. Seemed like it was pretty interesting. Seemed like it was well put together. It's also interesting how nowadays you have to turn to Russian sources to get anything actually interesting because our English American internet is so incredibly censored. Really want to emphasize how censored our internet is. People take for granted that we have free internet, and we don't at all. And people also, I think it's just something they don't think about often, but like every single language has its own internet. There's a Spanish internet, there's an English internet, a Chinese internet, etc., etc. We really don't interact much with the rest of the internets. Like, they're completely isolated from each other. A Russian internet, and our American and English internet is, honest to God, one of the most heavily censored internets out there. So, search dolphin submarines. It sucks. I don't know if you're talking about like the dolphins they train to try and find submarines and stuff, but yeah. There's an old, not a part of this presentation, but there's an ancient nuclear reactor that was like 120 million years old or something like that, or maybe even older. There's also the Mars was nuked theory, which is quite interesting. I have internet. Yeah. The internet is not... It's a series of tubes. Hong Kong. Bing, bing. Bing, bing. All right, so back to some OOPARTs here. This one's probably the most interesting one I have to present, honestly. This one is really, really intriguing. Don't know exactly what that wheel is, where it's from, but there is kind of like the vases, there's just no easy way to dismiss this one. It really does throw a wrench into, that's interesting. Don't have an explanation. Similarly, the Yonaguni Monument, which I've talked about a little bit on here before. Let me go back here a little bit. This is off the coast of Japan, and I don't recall the date that this would supposedly have been above water, but I also don't necessarily trust that kind of dating. Like, oh yeah, this was above water 100,000 years ago, and we know this through our, the science magic. But there's people that claim this is man-made. It's clearly not man-made, and I've actually shown these images before. I'm going to scroll down to this one. There's like an almost Stonehenge-like thing. There's these ring of rocks around this other ring here, and I wish I could show all of the pictures here, but Cora is gay, so I can't. But I mean, look at these angles. There's triangular angles. There's right angles. There's a lot of angles, and nature can make right angles, but you've got that combined with this circular feature and just so many other very strange features on this Yonaguni monument off of the coast of Japan. And I appreciate this guy, Brian Rommel, for drawing this comparison here. This is Sacsayhuaman in Peru. These top two images here that are above water and way above water. This is on the top of a mountaintop up here. And you see similar type structures. They look like stairs to nowhere. We really don't know what these features were. They're obviously man-made. They're obviously a part of a structure, served some type of purpose, right? They're, very deliberate, but we don't actually know what this was. And similarly with the Yonaguni Monument, we really have very little explanation for any of its features. You can see here in some of these, models of it, like it's a really complex, it's also over 150 meters long, but it's a very complex structure with all kinds of strange features all the way around it. Little passages with little stairs. Very, very interesting. Certainly an OOPART, if you believe the mainstream narrative, because when this would have been above water, according to the mainstream narrative, it's far before when any of these civilizations would have had, the wherewithal to build something like this. Where there would have been no civilization. The people at that time wouldn't have had civilization. They couldn't have built that. Similarly, Gunung Padang, which, talking about serendipity, when I was looking up Gunung Padang to add to the show a few weeks ago, it was unsearchable on Google, like a lot of these things. But for some reason, that's been re-entered into the matrix of things that you're allowed to talk about. It's now searchable on Google again. There's even been articles written about it, a bunch of articles within like the last 2 weeks. Which maybe means that it is bullshit. Maybe it's not actually evidence of a 30,000-year-old pyramid. I don't know. You interpret that however you want to interpret it. There's also the pyramid off of the coast of Brazil, I believe, which was scanned with radar, and they've gone back to look at a few times, and it's really deep down. I forget how far under the surface of the ocean, but it's, not just like right off the coast. It's pretty deep down there. And yeah, it looks man-made. It's kind of like this Yonaguni monument here, but in Brazil and even deeper underwater. Evidence, I believe this is evidence of civilizations. So civilizations well older than 12,000 years ago. humans have been around for a really long time, and I think we've been getting reset for a really long time. So the road from India to I don't know where actually, um, but there's that floating road that supposedly used to float, and now there is evidence of a road down at the bottom of the Indian Ocean. Um, these aren't really super duper OOPARTs. The Elamite silver, they're just a really, really impressive collection of ancient artifacts that are about 4,500 years old. They're extremely well preserved. They're extremely well crafted. You'll find a lot of examples of very old things that you've probably never heard of. There's a lysergic flask, the Lyser, maybe. I can't. Might not be able to find it. I might have to add this one. Yeah, I'll add that one to the next OOPART video because it's actually even more impressive than this silver stuff. But yeah, there's just, did you know that people were a few thousand years before we all forgot what perspective was during the Dark Ages, before people figured out how to, just paint a normal thing? We're making this beautiful stuff 4,500 years ago out of silver, 3D sculptures, but 1,000 years ago we couldn't paint a fucking cat properly. So this one's an interesting one. So this one does rewrite history pretty well, and I'm going to let this title tell the story right here. Brazil bans underwater exploring over fears of discovery of shipwreck would rewrite history. There are a few different New York Times articles, 1985 and 1982, they wrote about it. So let's see if they have pictures of, yeah. So here's some of the vases that were found, these Roman amphoras that were found, and essentially what happened is this guy found this Roman shipwreck. This American archaeologist found this Roman shipwreck. I had a minute, but okay. Found that this American archaeologist dives down off the coast of Brazil, finds this Roman shipwreck that's far older than the 1500s. Obviously, it's Roman. And supposedly Brazil was discovered in the 1500s. So this would pretty heavily rewrite the Christian foundation and origins of Brazil with Roman pagans far, far before that. And he dove down and pulled up a bunch of these vases, and he explored the shipwreck a bit. But then when he went back to explore it more, they had dumped a bunch of silt on top of the shipwreck and denied its existence, and then they banned diving for shipwrecks. They banned the exploration of shipwrecks off of Brazil because they didn't want history to be changed. They wanted to protect the narrative of Brazilians' history. And I talked, similarly about this with the Celtic mounds and the Native Americans. I've mentioned this with the Chinese pyramids, where they're planting forests on top of the pyramids to cover them up, and they're denying their existence because potentially they weren't Chinese mummies found inside of that pyramid, and they would rewrite the history of China, and the integrity of the Chinese people would be compromised or whatever, right? You see this a lot with Egypt as well. You see this in Peru with you see this all over. You see this absolutely everywhere where, history is actively being suppressed. You see this with every single religion, but in South America, churches were very deliberately built. Catholic churches were very deliberately built on older pyramids and other sacred sites, because now those churches themselves are considered sacred sites, and you're not allowed to do archaeology or research in those areas because the churches won't let you. They're religiously protected, but they were deliberately built on top of older religious sites. And I mean, this just goes on and on and on. And you see this throughout all of history. It's not even just a modern thing. You see this throughout the entire, all of history. Everyone's been doing this constantly. So, you know, the idea of our history being presented to us accurately when you have so many different avenues that history is being attacked upon all at once. You've got the censorship through Google. You've got the outright dismissal, you know, when you do find something like that chariot wheel in the coal mine, it just gets covered up and not talked about. When you, same thing with that boat off of Brazil, it literally got covered up, and they go, you're not allowed to talk about this, you're not allowed to research this. It's just, you know, trying to build my narrative of just how much everything is bullshit, of just how much you're lied to, of how much they are intentionally deceiving you. By the way, if anyone wants to call in, just say so in chat, and I will relaunch Zoom. But otherwise, I think I'm just going to talk for a few more minutes and then peace out. Rome had plumbing. Can believe that. Not only did Rome have plumbing, what was Caesar's right-hand man, Aurelius, I think? He was got a lot written about it. He's real popular in pop culture and media. But anyways, he gets sent down, whether it was Aurelius or someone else. It doesn't really matter who the fuck it was. He gets sent down into the sewers for I don't remember exactly if there's like a blockage. I think there must have been a blockage, or maybe he was just supposed to map it. Whatever. He goes down into the sewers for an expedition, and he was, you know, remarking about how even in the time of Caesar, as they're rowing their boat, they're riding a boat into the sewers. That's how massive these things were, right? That they couldn't possibly construct something like that in their day and age. These sewers that were already ancient in Caesar's time were also this impossible construction in Caesar's time. Again, the narrative of our past is actually better. You know, every smartest person from history, every father of every science, and every, you know, greatest thinker and greatest mind, they all, every single one of them, respected the minds of the past, were trying to recover the greatness of the past, were interested in things like alchemy, in astrology, you know, all that pseudoscience that we're told not to believe in. So I can't believe Mesopotamia had a working sewer, but my granny got one in 1980. Yeah, you know, what I was just saying, we're being oppressed deliberately, and our history is being hidden from us, because if we understood the heights that we had achieved and how many different times we'd achieved those heights in the past with lesser technologies than we look at today, it wouldn't add up and people would revolt. There was even more I missed up here. Wow, you guys have been active. I have Sarah, Jesus Christ, that's a lot to catch up on. Yeah, good Waterboy reference. Don't mind me. I'm just reading your messages, fellas. I ate man meat though, so F new maybe. Eric, you know, whatever way you swing is fine. I don't think we need to be getting that explicit in our chat. You know, keep your mind out of the gutter and your mouth off the man meat. Trees or algae, lichen moss. Someone, by the way, and I might include this. There's so much with OOPARTs. It's going to be a multi-part series. So I don't know if this will make it into the second part or not. But someone in the Low Value Mail Discord shared a video of a guy um, sharing a whole bunch of different fossils that shouldn't exist. They were fossils of like flowers and these very soft things, leaves and flowers, these perfect fossils that showed like each individual vein of the leaf and stuff. And that shouldn't be possible through our understanding of how fossils are formed. So a lot of different avenues and objects and things to talk about for OOPARTs. I didn't get to the Ural Mountain walls. I didn't get to a lot of the stuff, but that's what the part 2 is for. I'm going to cover these last 2 discs, and then I'm going to check out for the night, for the week. So the Dropa stones, if you guys are into alternate history, you've probably heard of the Dropa stones. Unfortunately, they're total bullshit. There's absolutely nothing to them. And I kind of wanted to stretch this out a little longer, but like, it's such a bullshit, flimsy story. There really is nothing to stretch out. Like, if you look for images of them, you'll see this one here is the most convincing image of, oh, maybe there's something, but you can't see any details on this. You just see 2 discs. There's supposed to be like writing on this stuff, or you see this kind of stuff, which is just a repeating pattern. That doesn't mean anything. They were supposedly these ancient Chinese stones with this ancient language on it that this professor was able to decipher, and it told of aliens and stuff. And so you see images of these stones. Oh, look, there's a little ET there. There's another little ET there. The Dropa stones are bullshit, or if they weren't bullshit, they have very effectively been erased. You're not going to find any legitimate images of a Dropa stone. You're not going to find legitimate people associated with Dropa stones. The people that supposedly found them and researched them don't have any records to back up that they existed. So, if these were real, they got very thoroughly erased, but I don't think they were real. I think this was just a story. There's nothing here, but they're a popular one to pop up in OOPARTs, which is probably because they are bullshit, and so that's what you're going to see frequently through this heavily filtered Google search, this heavily censored internet. They're not going to show you the most interesting things. I didn't have to go to a Russian website using a Russian search engine to find the Dropa stones like I did for the chariot wheel. I just went to Google because it's bullshit, and so they're willing to show it. Similarly, this genetic disc. Now, the genetic disc is a little bit more interesting. There is a little bit more to talk about. I want to pull up. Here's a good image of it. It's a small image, but whatever. We'll make do. So this genetic disc, it's 2-sided. This is one side. There's another side to it as well. Both are carved. And obviously, you're seeing the female reproductive right there. The male reproductive right there. This kind of looks like a sperm or a fetus. And if you have a fetus at various stages of development, essentially it looks like these images. These are various stages of fetal development. I don't recall exactly what the outside is, but same thing. And on the other side, there's even more images with more details, and they are all depicting reproduction, and like a lot more detailed reproduction than, like I said, various fetal developmental stages. So a lot more understanding than people should have had in our past, because everyone is this savage idiot according to science, the science. But again, this stone just doesn't have really anything to back up the claims that it's from this ancient society. It is a Luddite stone, a Lydite stone, something like that. I don't know, but there was an actual mineralogist at a college that this stone was sent to. The mineralogist, whatever. The lady, the nice lady doctor, she did inspect it. She did verify that it was this type of stone. It is a Lydite stone. That's the only study that's really been done on it. And then there are articles citing this mineralogist, claiming she's an archaeologist and claiming that she dated the stone to 12,000 years ago and some other stuff. But yeah, it just seems to be a modern fake that just seems to be a modern fake. And there's no other art. It's unique, right? It's incredibly unique. There's no other artifact found like this, or even claimed to be found like this. With the Dropa stones, there were a whole bunch of them, supposedly. They all disappeared. But when you're just finding a single artifact, the art style doesn't match, the culture that it was found near, supposedly, and all this other stuff. It does seem like a modern fake. There are a lot of examples of people trying to forge history. So those are the OOPARTs I had planned for this episode. If you guys want more, there's no shortage of OOPARTs. There's the skulls that are missing the sagittal suture in Peru. I'd like to talk about them and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you enjoyed this episode, let me know. If there's other OOPARTs you want me to talk about, let me know. There's a lot of dinosaur OOPARTs. There's a lot of interesting ones out there. So yeah, gonna sign off for this week. Thank you, fellas, for tuning in. I hope you guys had fun. She didn't date the stone. That was just the fake story. I know it would have been quite strange, though, for a nice lady doctor to date a stone. Although, I recently saw an article about these old stones that were actually cave woman dildos. Just ridiculous. The narrative of history is already ridiculous, but like within the last couple of months, I mean, it's the last couple of years, but they're really accelerating it in the last couple of months, just with all of the Black Europe and female warriors and female hunters and stone dildos. It's really getting out of control. But thanks for tuning